Hi everyone, it's Dyer, and welcome to my channel. I'm just gonna be playing some Minecraft. I'm just gonna be working on building a little kind of hillside house that I've been wanting to make. So if you just want to join me on my journey while I do that, I'm gonna read you some crazy Reddit stories that I've found for y'all, and hopefully you enjoy. Here be the first crazy story I got you guys. Here's the first story I have found for you guys. I am a black woman who used to work at Chuck E. Cheese for 5 years. The final 3 to 4 months that I worked there, there was a new general manager, and at first he was great, but then he started turning into a menace. After a week or two, I started noticing that a majority of the black people there started quitting. I didn't think anything of it until I witnessed how the manager was treating the black workers. He would talk down to them, threaten their job, lie about them, etc. It would really just annoy and threaten the black employees until they quit. There were 2 to 3 of us left, 2 regular employees and 1 manager. I told the manager I couldn't work a certain day, and another kitchen guy was taking my shift. He told me no because the guy taking my shift was incompetent. I was head of kitchen and told my kitchen guy, hey, the manager thinks you're incompetent and doesn't want you to take my shift. Of course, the kitchen staff as a whole got upset, but we didn't know the other manager was listening to us, and she was known to snitch. She ended up telling the racist GM about what we said, and when I left to go home, he called me and said I was suspended for inviting negative feelings in the kitchen and gossiping. I thought it was absolutely insane because I wasn't gossiping. I was letting my kitchen guy know that he wasn't liked by management and encouraged him that he was a great part of the kitchen. After I hung up on the GM as a Christian, I started praying and asked God to forgive the GM and that he just didn't understand who he was working with and that he needed to turn his heart and mind around about racism. About a week after he suspended me for a week, I was at a vacation Bible school because after he suspended me, I was able to volunteer at work. I went back to work and decided to quit the day. I went back because I got another job offer while at a vacation Bible school. The GM was not at the store and people kept looking at me weird and moving out of my way. Halfway through my shift, I started asking people why they were acting weird to me, and someone said it was because I put a curse on the GM. I said I didn't do curse. All I did was pray for him, and then I found out what happened. During the week I was gone, the GM ended up in the ER due to shingles. He ended up ignoring the shingles and ended up with an issue that almost killed him. I was shocked. I told almost everyone how I don't deal with curses and only prayed for him to turn away from racism. I thought it was so wild, but at the end of of my shift, I left and never worked at Chuck E. Cheese again. A few months later, I ended up at a Chuck E. Cheese for a coworker's kid's birthday. The same manager was there and began starting a crazy ruckus in the store because he didn't want me there. He ended up calling the cops and told them I stole from the store and was banned, and none of it was true. The cops let me outside and I apologized because they even realized in the moment that the GM was racist. I'm not sure when he quit or was fired, but a friend of mine said he had to go because he was causing too much trouble at the store. Is it crazy that people thought I cursed him to die when I only asked God to forgive him for his racism? That, that's a pretty crazy story, not gonna. But yeah, yeah. This house is starting to turn out good. I'm still kind of deciding on how I want to really put everything together, but I'll get started on the next story for you guys. Okay, this one is kind of really crazy, but me and my wife were both foster kids. We bounced around a lot, and we both struggled to plant our feet firmly on the ground when adulthood started. I think that may be the reason why we were drawn to each other. We understood each other's struggles. I met her at a fast food joint I worked at, and it was honestly like a fairy tale. I noticed that she would only come in when she knew I was working, and eventually I worked up the courage to offer more conversation than I might take your order. Began flirting, and over the course of a few weeks, I think we sort of just fell for each other. I saw something in her that I'm pretty sure she saw in me too. We were like matching puzzle pieces. Her coming into that restaurant was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. She worked at a bowling alley across town, but when we began dating, we both kind of accelerated. It was like the thrill of finding each other drove us to strive to do better, not only for one another, but for ourselves. I started putting money towards online college classes, and she did the same. We weren't looking for doctorates or anything like that, just a degree that could maybe springboard us into the next stage of our lives. I ended up with an associate's degree in business administration. She ended up with an associate degree in accounting. It definitely wasn't easy by any means, but we did it. We could take pride in our accomplishments. We could actually dream together. She went from the bowling alley to a bookkeeper. I went from the fast food joint to a logistics coordinator at a shipping company. We were building together. We spent a few years in an apartment, but as we grew and expanded, we were finally able to find a little place to call our own. Nothing too fancy, one story, three bedrooms, two baths, but it was ours, and that's what mattered. We got married soon after. We wanted to have kids so badly. We wanted to provide a life that was never really had growing up, but no matter how hard we tried, we just never seemed to get lucky. I think that's what led us to the decision that ultimately collapsed the world around us. We didn't plan on anything coming out of what we did. We just thought would be a fun little experiment. We both sent in DNA samples to one of those websites you always see being advertised on late night television. We just wanted to know where we came from. We waited a few weeks. Finally, the results came back. I read them. My wife read them. I don't think it's a wound that's ever going to heal because what we found in those test results is that my wife is my sister. We thought it was a mistake. Surely we would have known. We sent in test after test after test. Each one came back the same. I guess my dad or mom or whoever couldn't be bothered to keep us together. She's a few years younger than me, so I guess we just missed each other. We didn't come up together. We didn't even meet until our late teens. I don't know how to process this. I don't know what to do. I can never stop loving her, no matter what. But I just don't think we can be together anymore. So that was honestly kind of crazy. So yeah, but um, this part right here, it's frustrating me because I keep falling off and I'm trying to do the roof. But yeah, but I won't waste your time. I'll get this next story started for you guys. Okay, this one is kind of scary. I think it is at least. So maybe you guys will find it scary also. But here we go. June 18th was both the best and the worst day of my life. Due to health concerns, my wife had been scheduled for a C-section. My heart filled with joy as the nurses gently handed me my newborn son. As I sat in the recovery room, my eyes filled with tears as I stared into the tiny face of my now sleeping infant. I'd do anything for this child. Slowly, I tore my eyes away from him to look up to the nurse. When can we see his mom? I asked. Her eyes widened slightly. They are finishing up as we speak. Don't worry, someone will come and get you when she's ready to see you. After walking me through using a bottle and explaining the call button, she left with a cheery. Don't be afraid to call one of us if you need help. There I was alone with my son. So many thoughts filled my mind. How I wished I had been a better man, how I longed to be a better father than mine, who had abandoned me at 12. As I stared into the angel like face of my son, I felt scared, proud, and motivated to be the best dad I could be. As the hours passed, my joy slowly became replaced with a new feeling worry. Where was Jessica? What was taking so long? Was this normal? Later that evening, a solemn doctor entered the room. It's Grant, isn't it? He said. Yes, sir, that's right. Where's my wife? What's going on? As I said, as I rose to my feet. He swallowed hard before saying, I'm sorry, Grant. There was a serious complication. A heavy bleed. Well, I'm sorry. But your wife has passed away. I couldn't breathe. It felt like all the air had been forced out of my lungs. I fell back into my chair as a muffled scream finally exited my mouth. The tears soon followed, and almost as if he could sense my pain, my son joined in. A moment I will never forget. Through my own tears, I reached out to comfort my crying son. I cradled him in my arms, whispering to him that everything was going to be okay. All the while, my tears gently ran down my cheeks, and dropped softly out his little head. Soon he calmed down. As he did, I helped him to look him in the face, and for the first time, his little eyes opened to see the world around him. He had his mother's eyes. I smiled, choking back more tears. Hello, David. Jessica loved that name. It was her top choice. I love you, son, and mommy loves you too. I gazed into the perfect face. In a way, it was like staring at his mother. For a moment, hope and resolve filled my mind. My Jessica had given me a great gift. I loved David more fiercely than I'd ever loved anyone. I promised myself that then and there to give David the world. I noticed then something that didn't bother me at the time. David's beautiful little eyes didn't look back into mine instead. They stared off into the empty space just above my left shoulder. That was 5 years ago. It hasn't been easy being a single dad. Several years ago, I got the courage to ask my boss if I could do the majority of my work from home. Really, all that's required to work in an accounting nowadays is a laptop and a good Wi-Fi connection. My boss was gracious enough to agree when he heard of my situation. Years as a corporate accountant have allowed me to afford a small home in the suburbs. This is more than enough room for the two of us. David has grown into a healthy and happy little boy. Next month, he will be 5. His light blonde hair and deep blue eyes remind me so much of his mother. His smile and laughter light up any room, and my life is altogether better because of my boy. Yes, something strange has been happening lately. I suppose that's why I'm writing this. Maybe someone out there will know what's happening or what I should do. Ever since his first day of life, I noticed David staring at something behind me. When he was an infant, they told me, don't worry about it. It takes time for babies' eyes to focus and identify faces from random objects. In no time, I should notice him doing it less and less. When the doctor said this, I was relieved. But the only thing is, that's not what happened. He never stopped. As a 1 year old, he would look vaguely in my direction. But as soon as I got closer, it was clear he was looking behind me, not at me. He would adjust when I talked to him. I'd say, Hi, David. His eyes would shift from looking over my shoulder to looking into my eyes. Hi, Dada, he would say with a smile. But as I lost his attention, his gaze would move behind me. He would just stare at nothing. Every now and again, he would smile at nothing, shake his head yes and yell, Yeah, or shake his head no and yell, No, no. This concerned me. As a first time parent, I had no idea what was normal toddler behavior and what wasn't. I remember that at one point, out of purely uncertainty, I called my deadbeat mom. All her life, my mom was unable to turn away from the same vices that ruled her when I was a child. Though she was now nearly 60, she was not very different from the alcoholic, drug addicted 25-year-old I remember from my childhood. What do you want? Her loud, raspy smoker's voice startled me. Mom, it's me. I said back into my phone, Oh, Grant, it's you, baby. What do you want? Came the reply. I just wanted to ask you, is it normal for toddlers to stare off at nothing? After a moment, she said, should I know? What do you think I am? Some sort of child psychologist? I'm sure whatever is eating at you is fine. Kids are kids. Who knows why the hell they do what they do? Look, Grant, I really have to go. With that, she hung up the phone. Putting down the phone, I muttered to myself, Thanks a lot, Mom. Over David's toddler years, the doctors didn't seem to be concerned either. I often heard, Oh, it's not really a concern. He's probably just a little shy. Some kids take longer developing socially, not a big deal. Shortly after David's 4th birthday, I finally convinced myself that it was not a big deal. David has such a sweet and caring little boy. He wasn't antisocial, though it was difficult finding friends his age. Overall, he was very smart for his age. So then why was I concerned? I needed to accept him for who he was and not try to change him. I decided then not to be bothered by him. The following months were good. Work was going smoothly. I was finally starting to make friends in the neighbor, and David would be starting kindergarten in the fall. Life was finally feeling normal up until last month, when suddenly in the middle of the night I heard quiet whispering coming from David's room. Rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I slowly walked the short hallway from my room to David's. I cracked the door open as quietly as I could, just in case I had misheard I didn't want to wake him. His dark room was gently lit by a little night lamp, which cast strange shadows on the walls. My body tensed up slightly as I saw David. He sat on the floor, back to me and the door. As he stared into an empty corner of the room, he wasn't staring straight ahead into the corner, right? Rather, his head was looking slightly up as he stared off somewhere near the ceiling. He was whispering. I heard him say things like, I'm glad you're here. Can I come with you? Do you want to play? I was creeped out. I felt certain he must be sleepwalking. Although this is creepy, nonetheless, I quietly opened the door further before saying, David, what are you doing? It's past your bedtime. We can play tomorrow. He went quiet and didn't move. A moment later, he whispered, he says it's bedtime. I have to go. Before standing up and slightly returning to his bed, he fell asleep instantly. I didn't sleep well that night. The next day was Saturday. I still felt pretty unnerved about last night. So as we sat at the breakfast table and I watched David eat his bowl of Fruit Loops, I asked, hey buddy, do you remember when Daddy came to your room last night? David didn't even look up from the cereal. He just said, yeah. Who were you talking to last night? My friend. I was puzzled. Your friend? Does he has a name? He nodded. His name is Billy. I frowned. Is Billy always in your room? He shook his head no. Do you know where Billy is? He looked up, but not at me, past me. Yeah, he's behind you. At that moment, I felt on the back of my neck the slightest movement of air, almost like someone directly behind you breathing on your neck. I don't know why, but I didn't want to turn around, but I forced myself to turn my head and look behind me. Of course, there was nothing there, just our empty kitchen. That evening, we had been invited to a cookout with a new family that moved into the house across the street. They had a young boy named Clay, who was a little over a year older than Dave, and the two had become fast friends. Shortly after lunch, David asked to go over to Clay's to play after the cookout. I had to catch up on some work projects, so I told him to go ahead and have fun. After watching to be sure that he crossed the street safely, I retreated to my office, put my earbuds in, and got to work. After about an hour in, I felt a light tap on my shoulder, thinking David had come back home and needed something. I took out my earbuds and spun around in my chair, ready to greet him. But David wasn't there. In fact, no one was there. I was alone. Confused, I walked around the house, calling for David. As I passed by the front window, I peeked and saw David and Clay playing joyfully on the lawn across the street. Swallowing hard, I turned to face my empty house, tried my best to convince myself that I was just tired. I must have imagined it. That night was great. The cookout was just what David and I needed. The time with other parents made me feel like I wasn't the only one struggling with raising my son. I stood next to Clay's dad, Brad, as he manned the grill. We talked about our work, sports, and our hobbies. Brad was easy to get along with. He was charismatic, and easygoing. I anticipated we would become fast friends. Hey, Brad, question for you, I said as he started pulling the hot dogs off the grill. Shoot, he replied. Did Clay ever have an imaginary friend? Chuckled. Why? Does David have an invisible buddy? Yeah, and it's really weirding me out. Maybe it's just because it's just two of us, but I don't know. Kind of creeping me out. Well, to answer your question, yeah, Clay had one of those for a while. Called it Mr. Buttons. Got a buddy who's a counselor, and he said it's pretty normal. It can actually help their imagination develop, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. I nodded. Expand. That helps. I'm sure my wife would have known what to do. And I don't know. Sometimes I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. Put his hand on my shoulder. We all feel that way from time to time. But you can always come to us for help. After all, it takes a village. Handed me a plate with a hot dog on it. Thanks, man, for everything. 9 p.m. rolled around and everyone started heading home. David held my hand as we crossed the street, back to our house in the middle of the street. He looked up at me and said, Daddy, could my friend do a sleepover tonight? Well, I guess we could go ask Clay's parents, but it's kind of late. He giggled. No, not Clay. Billy. Billy? Yeah, Billy wants to spend the night. Can he? Please? I hesitated, but then remembered Brad's words. Yeah, I think that would be fine. And jokingly added, but maybe we should ask Billy's parents first. David laughed. Billy doesn't have parents. He's very old. Somehow, that didn't make me feel any better. The rest of the summer was mundane. As much as I didn't like it, I got used to my son talking more and more about his imaginary friend. A month before David started kindergarten, I found him sitting alone in a corner of his room. He was quietly crying, his knees were brought up close to his chest, and his forehead rested upon them. David, what's wrong? He looked up when I spoke, snuffled and wiped his nose with his hand. Nothing, he weakly said. I walked in and sat on the floor next to him, gently wrapping my arm around him. What's going on, big guy? I asked softly. He didn't say anything for a while, just sat there sobbing quietly. After a few moments, I heard a low whisper. Daddy? Yes, David? I whispered back. Where's Mommy? I lump, a lump formed in my throat. This is the type of conversation the parenting books don't prepare you for. Well, son, Mommy got really sick and well, tears formed in my eyes. I had no idea how to have this talk. Well, she died, son. David's wet eyes looked at me, not sure what I meant. Billy says she didn't want me, so she left. I could feel a wave of anger coming over me. Jessica had given her life to David. Of course she wanted him, but I remembered this was David's trying to understand why everyone else had a mom, why he didn't. He was struggling with death, and now Billy has a guise to voice feelings. I'm sure he felt, no, not at all, son. She loved you very much. She just got really sick and had to leave. It's not because of you at all. She wanted you so much. He looked at me. Is she ever coming back? Holding back tears, I slowly shook my head and whispered, no, I'm afraid not. Billy says he saw her leave. I pulled my son in close for a tight hug as tears ran down my face. It's not true, David. Billy wasn't there. Mommy loved you very much, and so do I. He hugged me back. I love you too, Daddy. The last few weeks of summer, a change took place in my son. David had always been a shy kid, but he had become downright quiet. He spent less and less time with Clay and the other kids of the neighborhood, and more time wandering the halls and the rooms of our home. Despite the best efforts to get him to go play with his friends, as I drove him to kindergarten for the first time, it dawned on me that David had become a completely different child. He rarely looked at me or anyone else in the eyes. He simply stared at the ground. My heart broke as I looked at my son in the mirror. He reminded me of another little boy, a little fatherless boy whose absent mother didn't care, a little boy who shut himself off from the world. Seeing my son like this reminded me of myself. Hey, buddy, you're gonna have so much fun and meet so many new people today. And when you get home, how about you and I go to the park? He just stared out the window. Okay, he replied. After dropping him off and returning to my car, I sat there in the parking lot. I hoped beyond hope that David would forget about Billy as he met new friends at school. For the first couple weeks, it seemed like that was the case. His mood lightened and smiled more. I felt like I had gotten my little boy back. That is until I got a phone call. Hello, this is Grant, I said into my phone. Hello, Grant. This is Mrs. Perkinson from your son's school. David is currently sitting in my office at the request of his teacher, Miss Williams. It seems he has been upsetting his fellow students. If you're available, could you please come pick him up? I'll be right there, I said, barely masking my confusion. What was going on? David had never acted up in this way before. What was happening to my son? As I got into my car, I couldn't help but think of my wife. I miss you, Jess, I whispered aloud. David could really use his mom right now. As I entered the principal's office, I saw my son sitting silently in a chair, staring at the ground. Across the desk sat Miss Perkinson, who was tenderly trying to encourage him to speak. He looked up at me when I walked in, before his eyes moved to the empty corner across the room, where they remained fixated. Miss Perkinson stood up and walked to me. In a whisper, she said, Thank you for coming, Grant. David has been drawing some rather disturbing pictures. She handed me a piece of paper. He won't listen to his teacher. Normally, he's such a good boy. This is a very unusual. We're hoping some extra time with his dad will help. Thank you, Miss Perkinson. I'll take it from here. Turning to David, I said, Hey, buddy, we're going to spend the day together. How's that sound? He stood up, but his eyes didn't leave the corner until I reached for his hand. As we walked out to school, I unfolded the paper Miss Perkinson handed me. On the paper was a crude drawing of three stick figures. It looked like it was drawn in anger. Brown strokes looked like they were pushed hard and aggressively. Two of the figures stood together holding hands. One was a little boy with a wide smile on his face. The other was an extremely tall figure, completely black. Its arms and legs were far longer than its torso. Further down on the paper, the third figure lying horizontally on the page, its face was clearly sad, and red blots covered its body. I looked down at my son. David, did you draw this? He stared at the ground and shook his head no. Billy did. I swallowed and asked, is that you and Billy holding hands? He nodded. And the other one? Is that me? He sniffled before nodding. As we reached the car, I got down on one knee to look him in the eye. David, could you look at me? Slowly his head looked up. I could see his eyes quiver as he struggled to hold back tears. My heart broke with compassion as I pulled him in for a hug. David, I love you so much. I don't tell you that enough, and I'm sorry. You mean everything to me. I know Billy has been your friend, but right now, it seems like he's not being a good friend. You should know that. I'll always be your friend. I love you, son. He finally rubbed his eyes. I love you, Daddy. As we pulled in the driveway, I turned to David and said, how about you go change into your pajamas and we'll watch some movies together? Later, we can get some pizza. How's that sound? At that, my son perked up with a smile and responded, okay. I tried upstairs as I browsed the TV for a good movie. A moment later, a loud scream broke through the house. Adrenaline shot through my veins as I sprinted upstairs. Bursting through the bedroom door, I shouted, David, are you okay? I saw him lying in the corner, and his body shook with uncontrollable cries. I rushed to him, gently turned him over to see his face. The left side of his face was deeply bruised, and a thin stream of blood flowed from his lip. David, what happened? Through tears, he said, Billy's mad. What? I declared in disbelief. I told him I don't love him anymore, and now he's mad. My body shook with anger. As I sprung to my feet, I turned and screamed to the empty room. Who's there? Get the hell out of my house. Leave us alone. In my rage, I kicked the ball that sat in the corner of David's floor. It sailed through the air and landed in an open closet. My rant continued. Soon my anger lessened, and I stood shouting to catch my breath. In the momentary silence, I heard a noise. I spun around in time to watch the ball I had kicked slowly roll out of the closet. Every hair on my body stood up. Without taking my eyes from the closet, I reached around for the baseball bat that lay under David's bed. My fingers found it, and taking it, I viciously swung into the small closet. There was nothing there. The bat bounced off the wall in the back, and I pushed aside the hanging clothes and found nothing. I turned back to see David, and as I did, I felt impossibly strong fingers wrapped around my neck. I gasped for air, but didn't find any. Panic began to fill my mind as a cruel crack whispered from behind. He belongs to me. The room erupted with deep, gurgled laughter as I struggled for air. Then suddenly the fingers released. Through the laughter remained. Air flooded into my lungs as I fell to my knees. I glanced behind me and saw nothing. Then I looked at my son, who cowered in the corner. His hands tightly covered his ears as he tried to drown out the laughter. In a moment, I reached out, carried him in my arms, and dashed to the stairway. The laughter continued throughout the house. It wasn't until we got outside that I stopped. Watching this from a hotel room. David and I are leaving. I don't know where we're going, just not here. David looked at me, his face completely pale. Daddy, what? He's here, he whimpered. A knot formed in my throat. He says he's going to kill you. He's barely got the words out. I clenched my teeth and stared deep into my son's eyes. Where is he? He stares back at me before slightly glancing over my shoulder. Behind you. So that is all I got for you guys in this video. So I hope you enjoy, and we'll come back for more parts I have of crazy Reddit stories that hope you guys would enjoy. So if you liked the video, I would really appreciate it if you left a like or a comment, even if you subscribed. I'd especially like that. But thanks, guys. So I'm gonna leave it at that, and hopefully I'll get some of you guys to return and see another video.